computer.
Yeah, it's letting you record.
I
Yeah,
guess it did. Okay.
yeah.
What
All I've
happened?
got to say, dig a Dan, is I'm glad right before you ran all that water that I had taken a long bathroom break.
The funny thing is, I think me and about 1,200 other listeners all did the same thing. All right, so long, folks.
Have a good
So
one. Be
long.
safe and well. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Yep.
Dougie, how you doing?
I am doing fantastic, and like I said, I'm glad I peed before the show started.
I'm really happy for you too.
Yeah, nothing like running water to just.
Make
No,
you want to.
actually, though, I watched a little bit of his program there at the end, and I don't know what he was reading, but it was good stuff. As what I caught about what tyrannists are looking for and how to combat them. And I'll be honest with you, I've been talking about some of that stuff all along. We've got to be confident and so on and so forth. Be honest with you, the peaceful run of water was actually appropriate considering the topic and the matter. And thank you, chat room, for showing me love. The dancing cockroaches are just filling the space.
And for you, that's a compliment. Got
That's a
it.
compliment. That means when there are dancing cockroaches in the chat room, that is the viewers showing me love, and I appreciate it.
All right. Well, apparently we're recording. Let's begin the program. Alan Myers here. I am. This is another episode of For the Republic. Happy to have Dougie here, Mr. Constitution,
Glad to be
Douglas
here.
V. Gibbs.
Yeah, I'm glad to
Brady.
be here.
Brady may be showing the war hamster.
We might get a hamster sighting, maybe.
We just might. I think he's out looking for a snow cone right now, but we don't know. It could be. We're going to start off with some, I know, crazy wackadoodle news. And apparently the chair I sit in is big enough so one of my cats can sit behind me. Well, actually, she doesn't sit. She lays down.
See, the
She's
cat wants to be up where you are. My dogs are at my feet. See, that's the difference between the two types of animals.
right.
You
And
know,
and
it's like the old
apparently
joke. It's
I
like
don't
the
take
old
up too
joke.
much of the chair. But go ahead.
It's like
Sorry.
the old joke. You feed a dog, you take care of a dog, you give him a bed, and he thinks, "Gosh, that person taking care of me must be a god." You feed the cat, you give the cat a bed, you take care of the cat. The cat thinks, "Wow, that person's taking care of me. I must be a god."
Hey, it's all about perspective. Okay. Here we go. This one is actually out of the UK. Probably have to put my glasses on so I can read. And the title of this article is The New Road to Serfdom. Our property is no longer our own.
Now, have you read just for starting? Have you read the book The Road to Serfdom
No, I have
by
not.
F.A. Hayek?
Uh,
No,
Hayek, yeah.
it's a worthy read, especially if economics and all of that is in your wheelhouse, and it is. So F.A. Hayek, The Road to Serfdom, probably one of the best books about economics written, except aside from maybe Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell. Anyway, continue. I'm sorry.
Well, thank you. Thank you. The author of this is talking about one of the items written is that past controversies showed that both sides are usually assuming, without question, a good deal which we should now absolutely deny, and were all the time secretly united by a great mass of common assumptions. There would be assumptions so widespread, so taken for granted, that they would go unquestioned and unchallenged. Gee, could that be the can? Common accepted narrative?
Could be.
And in the past, or what was deemed worthy, is where we, the people, are the masters and the government, the servant. According to this author, once upon a time, it was really like that in Britain, but it faded away with the massive expansion of the public sector after 1945. And what they're talking about now is that they have a lot of immigrants in Britain, and different councils in different areas want to tell owners of second homes or empty homes, this is a wasted resource. We need to have access to it. Have you heard anything about this?
No. Now, that said, it fascinates me that we always use the word immigrants. I love immigrants. I have no problem with immigrants. The problem is not immigrants. It's people who immigrate to a country illegally, don't care about the laws, or even if they do it legally, but they don't want to assimilate and they want to destroy their host country. That is the problem. I hate using the word immigrants generally like that, and we've been trained by the mainstream media to do so.
Yeah, thank you. And apparently, recently, the government there had announced that it would require you, the homeowner, to get planning permission if you want to rent your house out to holidaymakers via Airbnb. Really? I have to get permission to do this?
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, and also in some towns they're even putting great limitations on it because the hotels are upset that there's so much competition.
this one paragraph, I'll read it. The truth is that even if we stopped inward migration entirely, we would still have to build nearly 4 million houses for the people already here just to get us to the European average of housing per person. There really is no way around this, and we must change the socialist planning laws. The government's tinkering is pure displacement activity and actually makes the problem worse. Apparently, if you have a home and it's empty, or it's your second home and it's empty a lot, you are a hoarder of housing. And this is against the public good. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I have an idea. How about we secure the border and we throw the jerks out that aren't supposed to be here and got here illegally and are breaking laws even as they stay here? Just a thought.
Just a thought. Let's see what else we got today. Well, for me, the whole thing is that it really it just keeps coming back to whatever level of government we're dealing with. What's the contract? Is it in the US, is this the US Constitution contract? Is it the federal government? Are we at the state level? Are we at a local level? What document created this entity and described what powers it had, and is it violating these powers? That's what we need to talk about.
You're talking about this funny thing called federalism. Because we don't have a national government like most countries where you have an overpowering government that just controls everything and everybody under the national government has to obey and comply. We have a federal republic, a federal government, which only has certain responsibilities, certain powers delegated to it. Everything else belongs to the local. It doesn't take an act of Congress to put in a stop sign, or at least it shouldn't. For example,
We got the war hamster.
I knew there might be a hamster sighting tonight, but the question is there a line of droppings on the way here?
I don't want to
Maybe,
know. I don't
or
want to
maybe there's
see
just
it.
going to be droppings
Snow
blown up
cone.
on us while he's here. They'll be like little hand grenades. He just kind of.
I think there's snow cone droppings. Brady, welcome to the show. Glad you're here.
Good to be here.
All right.
Sorry, I'm running a little bit late. Just
No, you're
little
fine.
bit
Can you
busy on my
just
end.
move to one side or the other so we can see who's behind you?
Yeah, see, that's why he's late. It's hard to see through that helmet.
Thank you.
So
Thank you. Thank
he's
you.
trying to find his way here, and
Yeah.
you have
Beautiful.
short little arms. It's hard to reach the steering wheel. It just.
Very nice. Very nice.
Doug, I've been working so hard. I haven't even set a foot outside all day long. I've been stuck on my computer for like 14 hours.
Not that he wants to. It's like -4, right? No.
And
No, it's
and he only has flippies to wear. So yeah.
yeah, no, I have boots, and it's a balmy like 37 degrees here.
Okay.
So it's the same temperature as the inside of my refrigerator. Got it. Good to know. All right. I'm going to just briefly touch on this one. Are you guys familiar with the COVID vaccine scenario?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. Okay. I
I've
didn't I,
got,
I didn't want to get into something
Yeah.
that you guys weren't, familiar
yeah,
with.
I know I don't want to be jabbed at, if that's what you're saying.
No. Apparently, this is according to the Daily Mail, the largest COVID vaccine study yet has found up to 3 times greater risk. COVID vaccines have been linked to small increases in heart, blood, and neurological disorders, according to the largest global study of its kind. An international coalition of vaccine experts looked at 13 medical conditions among 99 million recipients across 8 countries in order to identify higher rates for those conditions after receiving the shots. Had you heard anything about this?
I read this article already and I crack up that they're talking about vaccine experts looking into this. We don't need vaccine experts looking into it. We need persons who specialize in understanding, recognizing, and identifying illegal experimentation on human beings. Just saying.
Thank you. Well,
no surprise here.
The study also warned of several other disorders that the authors said warranted further investigation, including the links between a brain swelling condition and Moderna's shot. That just sounds scary.
Yeah. Yeah, COVID doesn't kill like the remedy does.
Anyway, it's once again this screams to me, how can you put something out on the market, a medical item that has not gone to long-term study, which is it's going to take at least 5 years, if not longer, to create it, get it in, test it, give it to people, and see what the long-term consequences. You don't do this in months, you do this in years. But it's interesting that this article came out.
Well, it's interesting that scientists or academics are coming to these findings and then are reporting them or publishing their findings. Every once in a while you have people that are the opposition, they're at least honest enough to admit when things are not what they thought. So kudos to them for this, putting this report out.
Yeah.
I've got a little bit to add on the subject.
Please do.
We can skip over the part that calling them a vaccine is probably not grammatically correct because a vaccine is actually supposed to prevent the
Exactly.
But that being said, I got an article I was going to bring to the show tonight. This one from the Daily Skeptic, one of my favorites. And it is talking about COVID, an inquiry into the COVID vaccine safety. And it is saying it's very likely, according to senior members of parliament, they've been going through a dog and pony show, pretending they're investigating a lot of things COVID related in England. But the wool's not going to be able to be draped over everyone's eyes the whole time. Quick quote from this. The MHRA is something health, whatever, one of their authorities over there, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, sort of like our FDA. Some 25 members of parliament across 4 parties have written the Health Select Committee asking for an urgent investigation. Citing serious patient safety concerns, it is claimed that they're far from protecting patients. It puts them at serious risk, discussing the vaccine plural. So yeah, it is perhaps the truth is going to come out and perhaps somebody might actually be held accountable. I am personally not holding my breath. Those of us who were skeptical from day one, have been proven to be pretty darn accurate. And going back to something Doug just said, to quote Donald Trump, don't let the cure be worse than the disease. And they did.
Thank you, Brady. All right, continuing on. This is a little wacky, but this, I guess, could only really happen in a place, let's say, like Colorado. They have a term in Colorado called 14ers. You ever heard of that? Anybody? Okay.
No.
14ers is land that is above 14,000 feet. And a lot of the peaks in Colorado, the land that leads up to them is privately owned. So a new deal is being, I guess, prepared or planned so that people can access the 14ers, the 14,000 foot peaks on private land. And because this is apparently people who own the land are saying you can't come across my land. And apparently this is threatening to limit the access to a handful of 14,000 foot peaks. This legislation, which is going through, apparently has bipartisan support, but also gives the landowners protection from liability if they post specified warnings about existing hazards. You heard anything about this?
I have not heard anything about this, but there's a similar thing that happened here in my neck of the woods. Not quite that high in height, but what happened was a redevelopment committee or whatever that works in Riverside County didn't like the fact that a friend of mine, and I'll use their first name, so I won't use their last, Marianne and Max had a house up on the top of a hill, and their daughter's house was about halfway up that hill, and they owned the whole hill. Now, this hill, she at the top of the hill, she also leased out space for like radio antennas and things like that, and she, made money for it. It's one of the higher points in the valley here. And so they decided the way to get her out of there, because they couldn't get her to leave, was to blue line it. What that means is on the map, they moved the blue line, which is on the edge of the land that needs to be conserved, and the conservation land, that the land that we need to conserve to save the wildlife, that blue line gets moved, and oh, look, oh, oops, it now includes her hill. You're no longer now allowed to develop anymore. There are certain things you're not allowed to do because, could disrupt the wildlife. And now when you cannot develop land, when suddenly your ability to get permits is completely shut down, what happens is your land becomes unsellable and it starts to drop in value, because the reason why most people purchase land is to, put stuff on it, do stuff with it. And in the redevelopment committee hearing in Riverside County, a friend of mine was there. I wasn't there, but a friend of mine was there because he was working with the city of Murrieta, and he was one of the good guys. And one of the environmentalists that was on the redevelopment team for Riverside County at one point during the hearing jumped up and screamed, "A human should not be allowed to own a hill." So when you told this story about what's going on in Colorado, that tale came to mind. This is, first of all, you're not allowed to own a hill. Pretty soon, you're not allowed to, own anything, unless you're inside your little 5-minute or 15-minute city, depending on how wacky doodle it gets. And this is a very real thing. They don't have to pass laws. They don't have to claim they're implementing, say, Agenda 2030 or 2050 or whatever the hell it's called now. All they got to do is move that little line on the map, in the name of environmentalism and conservation. and they run lives. That kind of sounds like what they do to Jan 6 people too. But anyway, and now Max and Marianne live in a condo down in town and got almost nothing for their land. They've been since removed from their property.
So
This
I've got a
is
question.
what happens when government starts getting involved in your right to own property. Go ahead, sir.
Well, what if I buy a piece of flat land and decide to build a hill? Will I have to sell my land?
Well, you better get a permit to build the hill in the first place.
What if I just get a permit to get some dirt and it turns into a hill?
Well, it depends on where did you get the dirt, what techniques and machinery are you using to build it, who are you using to build it, what is the compact ratio, and do we have water usage or water drainage problems? I could
So
go
now,
on. I could go on.
And see, that's a good point, because see, that person who told me about what happened in that meeting, he has since moved to Tennessee. Now, because he was a city council member in Murrieta, California, Southern California, he recognized how government can be. You know, there's permits, there's code enforcement, and all of those things. That's what he knew. So he moves to Tennessee, gets his little bit of property. He's going to build a house, and he goes down to the city, and he says, "Yeah, I just need to ask some questions. I'm thinking about putting in a barn. Oh, what permits do I need?" They said, "It's your property. Do what you want." And he said, "Well, I'm also thinking about," and he went through another scenario, and they said, "It's your property. Do what you want." And he asked another one. He asked another one, and the answer was the same. "It's your property. Do what you want." Then after about the fifth question, the person behind the counter finally said, "You're from California, aren't you?" Not the whole country isn't like this, but the left wants to make the whole country like this, like what we see here in California. And we better be firm on our property rights. We better stand strong. And this Colorado thing it reeks of that same type of control.
Well, they're trying to, open it up, but the what prompted this apparently.
Well, then what you do is you make an agreement with the property owners. You find a way to create easements, because there needs to be easements for roads and stuff like that to go through there.
Oh. Anyway, in 2019, a federal court awarded $7 million in damages to a cyclist for injuries on a trail at the Air Force Academy. How do you incur $7 million in damages when you're riding your own bike?
Punitive damages. Yeah, see, the actual damages is not what they got there. It's the punitive damages. This is the way the courts work. Well, where the big money comes in is when it's punitive. We're going to make sure it happens with punishment so bad that nobody else does this again.
This is what prompted the landowners across the state to limit access.
Right.
Because they didn't want to get sued, which kind of makes sense.
Well, once again, then, that's where you get an easement. As long as the person stays on the easement between and the county. If they get hurt on their property, it was because of the easement they were there, so it's still up to the county or the state or whatever. And typically, there has to be roads to get to the various properties, and those typically are easements. Yes, they go through properties. There has to be rules set up and all that, but that's, and the property owners, I understand they have to be willing to negotiate, but at the same time, it's not the government's place to just dictate either.
And it's also for people to take responsibility for what they do. All right. Now, this is wackadoodle news, right? Right?
So you got something that's wackadoodle, is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I was late.
Okay, this is wackadoodle news. Illinois has a recently introduced bill which changes the definition of abused child. House Bill 4876.
Here it comes. I know it's coming. Go ahead.
Was introduced in early February. Oh, by the way, this bill, if it passes, not only will it change the definition of what an abused child is, it will shield doctors from any liability. Isn't that convenient? According to the legislation, this gives minors the same legal status as adults when it comes to consenting to medical treatments and procedures related to abortion and gender transition. Consent to the performance of abortion services, gender affirming services executed by a minor is not voidable because they're a minor.
Yeah, and because they're old enough to figure out that it's okay to have something like that done to them without their parents' knowledge, and their parents disagree. It's child abuse. But don't smoke a cigarette or get a tattoo. You're not ready for that.
Don't drink. And apparently the healthcare professionals who are doing these services will not incur any civil or criminal liability as long as they rely in good faith on representations made by the minor.
These people should be thrown in jail.
So this, if parents,
Now, let me rephrase that. These people should be hung from the neck.
No,
you know what? They need to be hung from something else. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. So this is basically telling parents, you can't do anything about that. And if you try, the Department of Children and Family Services may step in and remove your children based on
Dynamax is asking for the state and bill number again, please.
House. This is Illinois, House Bill 4876. And if you're
in other words, it's driven by Chicago.
Whatever.
Because the rest of the state wouldn't be calling for it.
If it's a misdemeanor, you get a maximum sentence of 1 year in prison and a $2,500 fine. If it's a felony, it could be up to 15 years behind bars and up to $25,000 in fines, because you, as the parent, have decided what this minor child wants to do is not okay, because the state knows better. Any thoughts?
Yeah, Huxley's Brave New World comes to mind. Go ahead, Warhamster.
I got nothing. I think these stories pretty much answer themselves. It's absolutely, it's clown show. It's ridiculous. The worst story I heard was I think up in North Dakota, Wyoming, where they actually took a child across state lines, took a girl away from her parent, a girl or boy, I forget which it was, away from their parents, and gave them care that was legal in the state that they were in. And so care with air quotes. This is some of the most vile, authoritarian garbage we've seen ever in this country. The snapback to this is going to be epic, and I hope people are taking names, because these people that are just doing their jobs and pushing for this legislation, there is no mercy for these people if we ever live in a world with justice. It's disgusting. I don't.
Well, in the chat room it says it takes a village, kind of stealing something from Hillary Clinton, and I'm saying, yeah, but the problem is the village is full of village idiots.
Leave a family's children alone. You remember when you went to Tennessee and you want to build a barn house? Go ahead, it's your property. As long as you're not physically violating, breaking, damaging your children, torturing them, on and on and on, it's not state's business.
Having known a couple people that grew up in bad households growing up, I understand that Child Protective Services actually needs to exist.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that when it starts becoming run by these giant bureaucracies, and then it becomes woke, the opportunities for abuse, and we've heard these stories our entire lives about foster parents and the entire system. It is necessary to protect children, but we don't do a very good job of it, and the state certainly does an even worse job. So I don't know.
Well, the problem is there's no due process attached to the Child Protective Services. CPS is like the IRS. There's no due process. If someone says something, you're guilty. That's that, and you lose.
Goodbye. Yeah.
And when you give any agency, I don't care how good or how meaningful it is, that kind of power, you got nothing but grief on the horizon.
Thank you, gentlemen. I just wanted to get that out. Well, we got some more whack.
Of course we do.
Thank you. You ever heard of the Department of Transportation?
Yeah, I complain about it all the time. Go ahead.
Where in the Constitution does the federal government get the authority to create the Department of Transportation?
They don't.
Thank
Funny
you.
you should ask. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the DOT is back. And this actually started in 2021 when the House Democrats passed an infrastructure bill. And you might be surprised, but deep into it, you'd have to go hunting for this. They have a policy put in there where the federal government be able to control our vehicles. The law explicitly calls for automobile manufacturers. Now, the federal government has the authority to do this, right? Constitutionally.
Go ahead.
For automobile manufacturers to include in every car a system to passively monitor the performance of a driver of a motor vehicle to accurately identify whether that driver may be impaired.
Yeah, we've gone over this before.
And if it is, then it may prevent the car from being started, it may shut it down, whatever. But apparently the language is very broad, which means, let's say you're driving and a deer runs out and you make a massive swerve so you don't hit the deer. Boom. You're a problem driver. You got a problem. Going to have to shut your car down. So now your car's shut down and you could be in the middle of nowhere. My question is, and check this out, folks. You can submit a comment on this before March 5th. Look it up, Department of Transportation. They're looking for comments, especially, if you oppose this. The article was titled Department of Transportation Looking into Disabling Cars at Will. And in the article, the author included a suggested comment, as in, how does a mandatory sensor or kill switch protect the innocent? It doesn't. Who's going to have access to where your car is doing what? What would trigger a shutdown or prevent the car from being started? Because let's say they don't like what you say or what you stand for. All of a sudden your car won't start. Check it out. Any thoughts on this, gentlemen?
Hey, Warhamster, remember that anti-commandeering doctrine we were talking about earlier today?
I do.
Yeah. So, do you think the courts would be real fond of the government commandeering our lives in such a way?
Yeah, it's funny. No, they would not. That being said, have you ever driven in a car where they have those safety features and you can actually feel the steering wheel yanked out of your hands? And you end up, what you end up doing, your initial reaction is if the steering wheel's not behaving the way it's supposed to, and it yanks one way, you're going to yank the other way and actually causes an accident. I almost got taken off the road driving someone else's car because I wasn't expecting it. There's some of these safety features do just the opposite. And I'd rather trust my instincts and the other humans on the road than I would with any machine.
That's why I prefer my two old POSs that don't have computer chips in them. Well, one of them doesn't, one of them does, but it's, like to start it and stuff like that.
All right, last one. And this is actually surprisingly good.
Surprisingly good?
Good news. Well, the first part's not good. The first part is...
Thanks for bursting my bubble.
Yeah. Hey, you ever heard of the state of California? Well, the state of California wants all the ships that are off our coast they have to be refitted with some diesel exhaust particulate filter. Okay. And this comes from, the people who care the most, California Air Resources Board, CARB. There's a little problem here. And part of the problem is, excuse me, these devices
Are
that
not
they're
cheap.
demanding ships install, they're prone to failure and have caused fires.
Yeah, they're also not cheap. Let me say something before you wrap. I know I'm jumping in here, but I worked in the construction industry and had a Class A CDL license for 20 years. And this is the same stupid, and for those of you who are not used to hearing me cuss, these are the types of times that really makes me getting cussing mad. This is the type of shit that they did with the construction industry and big rigs. And what it did, especially because of the cost, is it put the little guys out of business. But don't worry, the big corporations could handle it, and they absorbed the business, and now they had less competition. First of all. Second of all, they didn't do anything or solve anything, and it's unenforceable. But what was really crazy is when I was in a construction job, and they just started doing this with construction equipment when I was getting out of the industry, where you actually had to put a little like license plate looking placard thing on your tractor or your digging machine or your backhoe or whatever it is you're using. And they would actually have state officers visiting cities to teach the city officers how to spot those who were not in compliance. Now, the state officers actually aren't going to go out in the field and do it themselves because the state doesn't have that kind of manpower. But don't worry, cities. And this is funny because you and I were just talking about something very similar to this, Warhamster, earlier today. Don't worry, cities. We trust you to make sure they're in compliance. But if you don't participate in this, don't worry. It's not a problem. You just won't get certain funds to help you fund stuff in your city from the state.
Funding is always a threat.
Yeah.
Anyway,
this story, and I didn't know about this story, but this story really pisses me off. It's the
really,
same shit that they did to construction. It's the same shit that they've done to big rigs, and the little guys can't afford it. They can't afford the equipment. And the big rigs, it was 25,000 per truck. The
well,
average little guy can't do that,
you've
and it
got a
puts them out
friend.
of business
You've
or
got a
sends them out of the state.
you got a friend with Rear Admiral Andrew Sugimoto of the Coast Guard.
Thank you.
He's basically taken the
I want to know
position.
him.
He's taken the position that this device has not been approved for use by the Coast Guard or the federal government. He also says that the Coast Guard will not enforce this regulation. There's a group called the American Waterways Operators. They're protesting this, saying that this thing is meddlesome and dangerous.
And also, your smaller, the people who can be required, the smaller operators, not going to be able to afford the equipment. Not going to be able to afford to do it.
Yeah.
Bye-bye boat.
And then somebody from the AMO has said that the device that the CARB is demanding install has never been approved as a safe device, is also not part of federally mandated safety standards. And yeah, it can cost up to $5 million per ship. So thank you, Coast Guard. Thank you, Rear Admiral. And this, I think, is what's going to have to really begin to happen, which is, in one word, nullification. We just ain't going to comply. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's
I've already said my piece. Go ahead, Warhamster.
Yeah, it's pretty much what Doug and I talked about. We did a show today, just the two of us in a studio for about an hour, and I called the show Federalism Rising, and we talked about how on this show we talked several weeks ago about the Hawaii Supreme Court basically telling the Supreme Court to shove it. We're going to enforce our own constitution, and the other part of that is Utah just passed a bill, passed it, that basically they're not going to allow any state officials to assist in any federal regulations that the state legislature of Utah deems unconstitutional. And I'm starting to detect a bit of a trend of nullification pushback. And I think,
Well, in this case, though, we have a state that's out of control, state of California.
yeah, well, it's the same concept. Well, California out of control, whatever led you to that conclusion.
Well, Doug's just crazy. Come on. We know that. Hey, before we move on to some topics that you gentlemen want to discuss, anything new out of chat that we want to address?
Not that I noticed, but I do have a story that kind of ties into what you've been talking about, kind of wacky doodle. So in California, they have been decommissioning dams because they're not natural.
Damn.
Yeah, because they're not natural, and we got to save the salmon and their ecological systems by getting rid of the dams. Of course, never mind that there's a drought, there's a water shortage, but we got to save the salmon. So this last dam up by Klamath, they finally took it apart. The water came rushing through. And what had happened since the dam had been built is the salmon had adjusted and had a new system they were using. Once they dismantled the dam and rushed everything through, it completely destroyed the salmon ecological system so badly that it will never resurrect itself.
Did anybody communicate with the salmon and say, do you need this?
Well, you know how it is with the left. We're going to do this to save your life, even if it kills you in the process.
So they didn't get their salmon experts out there to communicate with the salmon.
Well, I'm sure they did, but all the salmon experts agree with, the environmental groups that pay them their money with their grants.
With their settled science.
Yeah.
Why does this remind me so much about the Delta smelt?
You're going to tell us.
Yeah, same crap. Yep. But don't worry, we don't need to grow food.
For those who don't know, the Delta is probably one of the most, I guess, hydrated parts of all of California. It's a huge waterway just east of Sacramento, or in the Sacramento area, and they decided to not let the farmers, and basically the part of California that grows more of the country's food than anywhere else.
Yeah,
they wanted to cut
off the breadbasket of America is gone
because they wanted to make sure to preserve the Delta smelt,
which is not indigenous. And it doesn't even taste good. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, what I'm being told by a friend, and I have not confirmed this, is it turns out the Delta smelt is not likely to survive anyway. So.
Well, wait a minute. Can't they get Social Security for the Delta smelt?
I think that's a federal issue, Alan, not a state.
Oh, okay. Well, can't they get covered by California?
He's trying, okay? He's trying.
Can't they? I mean,
well, they're not going to have any Social Security because the farmers all left and everyone starved to death and California went bankrupt. But the Delta smelt lived for an extra decade, longer than its unnatural life was supposed to be.
Well, see, that's the bright side of the story. Something totally irrelevant happened. Perfect.
Well, see, the Delta smelt, all they need to do is self-identify as a different and dangerous species, and they'll find a way to save them.
I was thinking about figuring out what endangered species I want to identify as, because that way then some government will take care of me for the rest of my life.
I've always thought about declaring myself as my own country, then attacking the United States, and then after they nearly kill me, then apply for foreign aid.
See, I was just going to be a panda.
Yeah,
well, I already became a hamster.
But that's not, hamsters are not endangered.
Well, that's because we're war hamsters. We have war hamsters to take care of them.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Real quick, I just got to show you guys what the Delta smelt actually looks like.
Please do.
Yeah, the anchovy is more attractive.
Let's see if I can get there. Try this again. There's a Delta smelt for you. There you go. We're going to starve out half the country for this little critter.
That once again is not indigenous.
How well do they do in aquariums?
Oh, that's cruel and unusual punishment.
Really?
I have no idea. I am certainly not the expert on the Delta smelt, other than the story is ridiculous.
Well, thank you.
I got
There's
I
one.
got I got a fun bit of wackadoodle to share.
Well, of course, go right ahead.
And I'm not going to say a word. I'm just going to show you a headline. And Alan, I'm just awaiting your reaction to what I'm about to share.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second, and it is coming up right about now.
Well, and don't forget, we were talking about yesterday on Constitution Radio that climate change is the reason we have illegal immigration in this country.
Well, okay.
Well, yes, the climate refugees, yes.
Yes. Because we have good climate, the rest of the world has bad climate. So you have to be going into the good climate to ruin it. Okay. Oh, can
See,
you put
Biden was right. You're a Neanderthal. See, you
There you go, Alan.
Actually, I've been tested. I don't have any Neanderthal in me. Climate change is a bigger existential threat.
careful how you say that.
What? Which
Nothing.
word?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Old construction joke.
Bigger existential threat than nuclear holocaust, says Biden. Okay. Well, first of all, whatever he says, of course, is just a gift. Thank you. Climate change, something that we usually refer to as weather or the seasons. What's the threat is the denial of the reality. And to put everything that goes on, thank you for that, Brady, to put everything on the shoulders of CO2 is absolutely cruel and unusual punishment. CO2 at 420 parts per million, aka 0.04%, that would be 0.04%. And you're telling me the whole climate pivots on that? And what really brings me to support my position on this is the other greenhouse gas that is really getting some bad press is methane, right? CO2 increasing, methane increasing. We have to stop raising cattle and eating red meat. Methane, methane, methane. Methane is measured, and I don't question these measurements. I accept them from the sources that provide them, like the EPA. Methane is 1.9 parts per million. That would be 0.00019. Let's say we round it up to 2. That's 2 10,000ths of 1%. And this is pivotal. This is manipulative. Every prediction that I know of that has been made did not come true. From global warming, because if global warming was really happening, all the ice would be out of the Arctic by now. It's not there. There's more ice in the Arctic now than there was 15 years ago. The glaciers in Glacier National would be gone. The island of Manhattan would be underwater. On and on and on. And I'll leave you with this. Given that the sea levels have been rising for 12, 14,000 years since the end of the last glacial period, but if the sea levels are really rising, there's a place on Wales, a seaside resort called Borth, B-O-R-T-H. And in 2019, they got hit by a huge ocean storm, huge. Now, you would think that things would have been, the sea levels are rising, correct? Well, no. The storm came in and it took so much sand away. It didn't bring it and add it. It took so much sand away that it uncovered the tops of a buried forest. 5 different types of trees: alder, birch. 2019. It took sand away so you could see the tops of a buried forest. The forest, the trees were estimated to be 4,500 to 6,000 years old. Sea level has been rising for a long time, and we didn't have that many people driving their SUVs to their jobs at the coal-fired power plants back then. So global warming's been happening for a long time because we're in an interglacial period. We've been in it for 12 to 14,000 years. Other than that, I don't have much to say.
I'm laughing at the chat. It's pretty unanimous that the Delta smelt belongs on a fish hook as bait. And I was cracking up at that.
Oh, okay. So no one was listening to me, but we were
No,
talking
I
Delta.
was listening to you,
Okay.
and here's what I've determined. Your disinformation, misinformation, and propaganda is dangerous to the world, and therefore the German minister who has announced the pre-crime surveillance needs your information so that they can prosecute far-right extremists like you before you say something. That way we can get you before you open your mouth. They're
Minority
actually working
Report.
on that.
Well,
Minority Report.
What I really want to know is which is a bigger threat to the Delta smelt, the nuclear Armageddon or a little bit of warming? Yeah,
My fish hook actually is probably more dangerous to the. I agree with the chat room.
You got any fishing up there in Oregon, Doug?
Oh yeah,
What are you gonna catch up there?
yeah. Matter of fact, the last time I went fishing there, quick 30-second story. I bragged to my wife how much fishing I've done in my life, how good of a fisherman I am, and I've never gotten seasick in my life. It's her first time ever to fish. I'm even gonna tie the knot for her, hook for her, and bait her hook for her. We get out to sea, and for the first time in my life, I get seasick and I catch not a single fish. She's caught so many fish that she's got to start giving them away to other people on the boat because she's gone over the limit. So, warning: never brag about being a good fisherman.
Well, not
But
on
it really was this big.
not on an empty stomach.
My friends up in Oregon that I grew up with, they were all avid bass fishermen, and that's like a religion up there.
Yeah, fishing is awesome up there.
Well, no, bass fishing in particular.
Mhm.
These people were fishing snobs. They would never deign themselves to catch anything other than bass.
Let me get the
They
skill
were
head going.
Oh yeah.
See, I'm a salmon fisher by trade, and it's usually on aisle 2. So that's where I do all my
Aisle
fishing.
2. Yeah.
Aisle 2. That's right. Who's got a topic to share?
Well, I already talked about my damn salmon. I mean, my dams and salmon. So I've got more I can talk about, but I want to leave it up to you guys for a moment.
Brady, what do you got?
Well, I emailed you a pretty fun topic that'll take a bit of time if you want to go through that article.
Go right ahead.
I'll pull it up. And did you get a chance to read it, both of you?
Part of it,
I
but
did not.
I'll be able to respond.
Okay, well then I will pull up the article momentarily. This is called The Transportation Highway to Dystopia. I'm going to blow it up just a little bit before I share. And this is a topic that's similar to some of the things we've discussed on this show and off the show. So that's why I shared it with Alan and Doug. I thought it would be a fun topic today. All right, this is from the American Policy Center. A new article from APC, The Transportation Highway to Dystopia. It starts. Is this big enough?
Oh, you know what? I did read that one. Okay, go ahead.
Good. You'll have some good comments. Last year, the Environmental Protection Agency allocated $3 million for Tennessee to develop its first ever climate plan through a climate pollution reduction planning grant, which is established by the Inflation Reduction Act. Does that have anything to do with inflation?
Well, I think if you get to the 2,000 pages, you'll find out no.
I'll take your word for that one. The plan is to be divided into 2 parts and done over 4 years. The Priority Climate Action Plan and the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. They do love their titles and acronyms. This plan is not just for Tennessee, it is for every state. Multiple departments of the federal government have put this plan together, working efficiently as governments always do. And they certainly aren't about to write a different one for other states. Look into your local general plan and you might just see the edicts spelled out there.
Mm-hmm.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Please do.
Isn't government and efficient, aren't they basically the same word?
They would be antonyms.
Yeah. I mean, one goes with the other, of course.
Yes. Well, I said
Perfect.
antonyms.
Perfect.
Oxymorons.
The agency will create an inventory of the state's biggest climate offenders and then draft a plan to cut that pollution statewide. Below in italics is the executive summary from the U.S. National Blueprint for Transportation Decarbonization. This is now law, people. What I'm hearing thus far is that you have a bunch of bureaucrats that are climate change nut jobs that are going to go out there and say, basically shut down businesses because they're successful.
Mhm.
The long-term strategy published by the White House in 2021 calls for an 80 to 100% reduction in transportation emissions by 2050. Alan, what do you think a 100% reduction in transportation emissions look like?
Everybody's holding their breath.
No transportation. No current.
No, you can't even breathe.
Well, no. This, if you're not driving something, you can.
So you're able to walk. All right. So maybe we need some 15-minute cities so we don't have to drive anymore.
No, some of them are calling for 5-minute cities. That way you don't have to even have a bicycle because you might breathe hard and then that's too much CO2 too.
It's not the bicycle, it's the public transportation.
The electric.
This is ESG for states. That's all it is.
Alan, do you mean the electric buses that keep blowing up and catching on fire? Those ones?
Well, some of them blow up, some catch on fire, and some of them are just too expensive to maintain.
Okay, so when a bus catches fire, does that release CO2 into the atmosphere at all?
Well, only if the people start screaming.
Which I would imagine is probably going to happen.
Yeah.
Reading on, the transportation sector is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, responsible for 1/3 of all emissions. I thought that was cows.
No, that's methane.
Okay. Well, it said greenhouse gas. So that is that would be methane. That'd be included. So apparently the cows have been supplanted as the biggest enemy.
Well, we've been eating so many cows. There's not so much methane. See, I'm doing my part.
Well, not anymore. They burned all the cows in Texas alive last week. So you won't be eating a whole lot of beef this year. To address the growing climate crisis and to meet the goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions economy-wide by 2050, it is critical to decarbonize transportation by eliminating nearly all GHG emissions from the sector. Now, I want to pause there because we've been talking about in this show how countries all across the world in the last few months have been backing off of their net zero policies.
So are companies.
We've seen how automakers have been backing off their net zero policies. We've seen how companies have walked away from ESG and everything like that. And yet the Inflation Reduction Act is going to still go forward with let these bureaucrats, these lunatic climate freaks that are in the bureaucracy create regulations that are going to destroy businesses in all 50 states in America.
Because as we've talked about on the show before, it's all about getting you out of your car and killing the free market. It's all about making America communist. And you staying within your little town, don't go anywhere, and you can't even afford to get one of those cars. But don't worry, your high-ranking bureaucrat will drive a car for you to get where they need to get so that they can make sure that you're safe from, yourself.
Do you remember that? Speaking of that, do you remember a story a little while ago where think a House member was driving to the state and was in a EV,
Well, I
but
remember this, yeah.
had one of the aides driving a
Right.
gas-powered car.
Commercial still showing vaccine. The vaccines are no
Sorry,
longer
guys.
nefarious.
That's my computer making noise.
Okay.
Apologies.
But the person who worked for the representative drove ahead in a gas-powered car to get to the charging stations to make sure that one was available when the representative got there, and just blocked it.
So I was looking at something the other day too, because see, it would completely kill a lot of what I do. Because see, I travel a lot, not just my classes, but also I drive sometimes out of state for events. I drive out of state to go to my other house, things like that. And so I did a little research, and the average EV car can go an hour and 15 minutes to 2.5 hours at the speed limit on highways per charge. So that means about every hour and a half to 2 hours at best, if everything's going right, I will need to stop to get a charge. To get a full charge, because you're near empty, it takes an hour to 2 hours. And that's if a slot's available. So essentially, almost just under, but real close, the amount of time you drive is the amount of time you need to charge. And, in the sense there's going to be waiting time, to get a space and, the time it takes to plug it in, all that. I'm going to say that the time to charge is really going to be pretty much even with the time to drive. So if you have a 15-hour drive to make, don't worry, it'll only take you 30 hours. And that's if, of course, you're finding these places along the way in the right place. If you need to drive 2 hours, you may make it to your destination, maybe. But at your destination, there probably won't be a place to charge because, they're not everywhere. But don't worry, after that, if you are lucky, you still have a little bit of a charge left, you get to one of those places, then wait an hour or two so that you can drive your hour or two home.
Hey,
How
Brady.
idiotic is this? How stupid is that, number one? Number two, and once again, I'm sorry, Alan, I know you hate it when I get talkative. It's rare, but, it
Wait a
happens.
minute, you get talkative?
Yeah,
No
I
way.
know.
No.
And I've said this before, and someone in the economics industries or the financial services industries understand this really well. I remember as a child being taught, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. But let's make everything electric. Really? How stupid has humanity gotten? Well, what it is it's not stupidity, it's tyranny. They're not stupid. They know exactly what they're doing. You can't afford the car. You can't afford to go anywhere. It'll take too long anyway. And now they've got you right where they want you, in your own little space. But don't worry, down the road, they'll make it so that it'll be easier for you to get a permit so that you can leave your house for 10, 20, or 30 minutes at a time. Down the road someday.
Thank you,
Doug. Aldous Huxley is suddenly coming to mind again. Brave New World.
Brady, read that quote in blue that your cursor was just on.
As our transportation system and communities are increasingly threatened by worsening climate impacts such as hurricanes, wildfires, flooding, heat waves, drought, decarbonizing the sector is essential to addressing this existential crisis.
In the past, have we had any of those in this country ever before?
No, it's a brand new phenomena.
Oh, okay.
Except for the author of this article disagrees. It says not one of those scares is true, and the decarbonizing plan is total nonsense being used to scare us into falling for their plans that are designed to bankrupt our states and country. They must keep us terrorized. If there is not a crisis, they can't seize more power. which is why we had the Red Scare, which is why we had the War on Terror, which is why we had the war on crime, the war on drugs, which is now we have the war on climate crisis. We have the war on misinformation and disinformation. All of these are excuses for the totalitarian regime to take on more and more authority that they were never granted by the Constitution.
I want to thank 2020 Liberty in the chat room for setting me straight. EV rule number 1, only charge to 80% or run your battery. Number 2, do not fully deplete the battery or run it. Range 60% of stated range. So in other words, you're going to recharge every hour of driving. So my 2-hour drive to Torrance is going to take me 4 hours for my class.
If you can find someplace.
If I can find the place. Well, they're all over the place. I know because I see all of the spaces taken with Teslas and other cars lined up behind them waiting for a space. Oh, wait. Oh, gosh. It might take more than an hour or two.
All right,
Crazy.
I want to read this next paragraph because there's a fun word in there that we're going to have to play around with.
Are you in blue or in the black?
I'm in blue. Well, first of all, we skipped above. Here's an excellent explanation of why net zero is impossible and stupid. I will click.
Would you give
that's good.
give
I like that.
acknowledgement to the author
Of the article or
Yeah.
this?
of the article?
Oh, well, this is Kathleen Marquardt.
Right.
Marquardt. And she has been apparently the head of the American Policy Center for about 3 decades. And it appears to be very, very like-minded. 30 years leading the fight for American property rights and sovereignty. I do like the sound of that.
Do you think we need to interview her?
I do. I think she should definitely be an ally. I am not going to click on this explanation of why net zero is impossible and stupid, but I'm going to do that during the week. And I will bring that article to this show next time I'm on.
Which will not be next week.
No, I'll be traveling next week. I'll be in Tucson, Arizona next Sunday and probably unable to have a decent studio set up. I will have a 6 and a 5-year-old crawling all over me. Nuisance type thing. The recently enacted bipartisan infrastructure law, the BIL, they love their acronyms, and Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, together represent historic investments in the future of our nation that will transform how we move and live while we build the backbone of a safer and more sustainable transportation system. Gosh, they love their freaking descriptive words. Has nothing to do with common sense or what makes sense for the country, but it sure does make you feel like you're doing something good, doesn't it?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
How are they using the word sustainable?
That's the word I was talking about. Alan, you are a prize student. Alan, would you please define sustainable? I mean, if I'm going to walk the rest of my life, that's pretty sustainable.
If you don't have, as long as you have good bones and muscles, yeah.
No, I do so far.
Good.
So that's sustainable. No, what do they mean by sustainable? Define it. Ask when you debate these people, ask them to define their words. They can't do it. They can't. But they sure do feel good about saying them.
Yes.
Historic investments.
Well, they feel good and they're a part of something.
Doug, which part of the Constitution talks about historic investments in the future of our nation that will transform how we move and live?
Let me get back to you on that because at first thought, there's nothing. It's a big goose egg. Federal government has no authority over all of that, but yeah. Maybe there's an asterisk somewhere. I'll see if I can find it. It's right under emergency powers, I think.
These bills, this is official legal language, and all they're doing is blowing sunshine up our collective arses. It's nothing but gobbledygook, feel-good language that means absolutely nothing. These are not serious people, but they are seriously dangerous. Reading on. Sustainability. We got to have some fun with that, Alan. Let's go look up some definitions and see if anyone's ever actually.
Hold on. Give me a moment. But keep going.
This blueprint for transportation decarbonization follows capitalized. Now it's an official term, Doug. follows the momentum from those investments to crystallize a first of its kind strategy for federal leadership and partnerships to decarbonize the entire U.S. transportation sector. More flowery language. We get to crystallize it, Doug. Doesn't that make you feel good when I read it with all this inflection?
No.
You know, it reminds me of a quote that I have in my book, Repeal Democracy. Repeal Democracy, the book I published a year ago. C.S. Lewis. Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive.
That's absolutely outstanding.
Sustainability refers to the ability to maintain or support a process continuously over time. Sustainability seeks to prevent the depletion of a natural or physical resource so they will remain available for the long term.
We will control everything and you will be happy.
You will own nothing and you will be happy.
Well, I had to tweak it a little bit.
I know.
So, Alan, how does that definition of sustainable fit into this sentence?
It doesn't.
Thank you.
Don't question, just do what your funders tell you to do.
Hey,
That's
Do
why
you want
they-
your grant or not?
it gave me happy, tingly feelies, so I feel good. Decarbonizing transportation will affect everyone. No shit. And solutions must address the needs of all urban, suburban, and rural communities, except for those of you who actually want to drive. My commentary. Businesses of all sizes and individuals and families at every socioeconomic level. Of course, it's going to affect everyone. You're taking away the entire lifeblood of the economy, you dunce. Plural dunces.
Well, you know, see, now you're worried about an economy. We're trying to save the planet here. Who cares about economies?
Let me ask somebody who might have an idea about transportation big rigs, Doug. If we had to go all EV, including the big rigs, number one, how big are those batteries? How heavy are they? And how much longer will it take to deliver goods?
Well, and you know, I drove in the I drove in the sand and gravel industry, and one of the things that is important in sand and gravel is that you get as much into your truck as possible. We max it out as close to 80,000 pounds as we can because the company's getting paid by, you know, the weight and the load there, you know, and I have about as much faith in an EV truck delivering that sand and gravel as I do an EV heavy military helicopter getting off the ground, traveling a long distance and killing the enemy. It's on its way. Oh, we got to stop in Italy to recharge the battery, but don't worry, we'll eventually get to our target.
Continuing on, this is a fun sentence, and I'm going to have to stop a couple of times here before I get to the end of it. The scope, scale, and speed of the shift will continue to require solutions that leverage market forces and private sector investments. Boy, that sure sounds like a lot of government invention in the government.
It sounds like it's killing the free market. Laissez-faire,
Wait a minute.
out the door you go.
Keep going.
When they say leverage market forces, Alan, what does that mean to you? They're putting their fingers on the scale. They're going to pick winners and losers. They're going to make it so, no, if you don't follow our utopian vision, you will not be able to succeed in business. That is
Holy shit, mercantilism.
Well,
oh
which what gets me is the last part of the sentence, which government policies and investments should jumpstart and guide.
I was gonna tee that one up for Doug.
Where in the Constitution does the federal government get the authority to tee this stuff up?
Well, not only is it not in there, but as I just mentioned with my snide remark about mercantilism, this is the type of crap that the founding fathers were trying to avoid. This is the whole reason for the Constitution, is to stop this kind of junk, to stop this type of intervention by a central power dictating to the markets and dictating to the citizenry what they can or can't do. The whole point of the Constitution was to stop this crap. And while there's a different logo and there's a different technology and there's a different name for it, it's the same junk as what was going on under King George III. No, business, you're not acceptable because your competition with your British counterpart or with whatever our narrative is or what we're trying to accomplish doesn't work. So you can't do that. We're going to pick the winners and losers. Bye-bye, colonial merchant. This is the garbage that the whole Constitution was written to stop.
I'd like to explain my thought on leverage market forces and private sector investments. Leverage market forces is another way of saying, if you out there in the free market do what I want you to do, I'll do business with you. If you don't, I won't. Private sector investment. We'll give you tax credits. We'll give you grants. Do what we want. That's the new way of mercantilism, right, Doug?
Well, and ultimately what it's going to do is it's going to eliminate all competition, and you're going to wind up with either a government-owned or a government-controlled through heavy regulation market, and the means of production is going to be based on those heavy regulations. It's mercantilism pushed into a fascist or socialist model is all it is. But in the end, what it means is you will eat what we tell you to eat, you will buy what we tell you to buy, or you won't be able to buy anything because we'll give it to you, but don't worry, you'll be happy. You know, it's the same stuff. And once again, this is the whole reason the Constitution was written. And, you know, yes, we know that the Constitution is being usurped. And, you know, it's like I tell my classes all the time. Someone will say, well, Doug, when did the attacks against the Constitution begin? And I said, before the ink was dry. That's always the answer.
Well,
the thing is, because of technology and because we have a bunch of communists behind behind the gate with the gate clicker, the enemy's not at the gates, they're inside the gate. And they've got the gate clicker. But going back to my C.S. Lewis quote, but don't worry, it's for your own good. It's good for you. Don't worry, we've got you. We're here for you. It's tyranny in the name of we love you, man. We love you.
You guys are both clearly forgetting about the jumpstart clause of the Constitution, which is right there in the right next to the Commerce Clause.
The jumpstart clause?
Yeah, it's right there. Well, you know, when they say the government's job is to regulate interstate commerce, they actually meant jumpstart.
Oh, so you mean a little Keynesian economics? We got to prime the pump.
Bingo. Read a little bit. Let me jumpstart the conversation a little bit more, since that's our turn today.
One more comment.
So what he just said, if you didn't notice, audience, is he basically said in a nice way, here, let me go get some gasoline so I can throw it on top of this flame to really get things going. Go ahead, throw your gasoline.
Well, before you do, you posed the question, when did the attack on the Constitution begin? And you said
before the ink was dry.
Well, to me, it is, when did Alexander Hamilton open his mouth?
Yeah, it's a good point.
There, I just wanted to get that out. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the rebuttal to that lovely flowery paragraph above, and I'll just do that quickly. The above statement is the plan, upfront and basic. They want to transform how we move means we will all be walking, biking, or taking public transportation as far as allowed. Where we live means we'll be herded into 15-minute cities. We touched on that one. While we build the backbone of a safer and more sustainable transportation system, which means the lowest common denominators of transportation. And with the winter storm we just experienced at Christmas, I have no idea what year this was written, we see how well those electric vehicles that we are supposed to be transferring to in order to make the far more practical gas-guzzling vehicles obsolete.
But don't worry, we'll have a train for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take up the whole show with this article because we could. I think the point's been made pretty clear.
Yeah.
I can stop screen sharing, and if I find a couple of other good parts in there that really just need to be shouted out, I will do so. But
Thank you so much, Brady. Thank you. But it's important to address these issues and have people check into them, because I don't know if it was 2 or 3 years ago, as an example, Texas got hit with big winter and the solar panels got covered with snow. The wind turbines froze. And if they didn't have regular sources of energy, it'd be over.
Well, it's like I've told this show before, you go to solar and wind power only, and everybody gets home in the evening, as the wind is dying down and the sun's going down and there's less electricity to plug in their car, turn on their vacuum cleaner, turn on their washing machine, cook dinner, and watch TV. What could go wrong?
Nothing, because it's sustainable.
I have to read one more paragraph because this one, I found the
I
one.
don't blame you. This is right on target. Go ahead.
I got to read it. Stakeholder engagement and public-private partnerships, mercantilism, stakeholder engagement that ensures representation from traditionally underrepresented, overburdened, and underserved communities across all the proposed strategies in this blueprint will be essential to achieving an equitable transportation future.
What the hell does that mean?
Screw you, Whitey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean,
what does that mean?
they're basically throwing every single one of their diversity, equity, inclusion bits of nonsense into one single bill that is actually, remember its title, the Inflation Reduction Act. All of it in one bill.
And what does this have to do with inflation?
Nothing, but if they call it Inflation Reduction Act, they don't have to call it the Green New Deal, that not a single Democrat would even vote for.
And this makes the new Green Deal look tame.
Well, this is what it is. This is actually taken from the Green New Deal. They just threw it in.
But they've actually added a little extra steroids to it.
Well, it's 4 years more mature. They've had a chance to get far more woke. They've got more talking points.
Well, they've had a chance for more of their bureaucrat deep staters to write more into it, and nobody read it.
Well, you pass it first and then you read it.
Well, and then you never get around to reading it because, you got to now start planning for your reelection a year and a half from now.
Well, why read it?
I talked to Steve Stockman. That's what he told me. He said, Steve Stockman, who took Ron Paul's seat, the first 6 months you work on some legislation, and the final year and a half you work on reelection.
People that can go back to their voters and look them right in the eye and say, I voted for this and I have your best interest at heart. Or, I mean, I don't think there's any salvation for these people in any sense of that word, salvation. These are not serious people. You can't have a conversation with somebody who believes that this is a good idea. They're beyond help.
Are you going to read the response?
We should read the rest of the paragraph, or is it bad enough already?
Well, let me say this. You're talking about these people. Let me say this real quick. There's a special place in hell for these people. All right, go ahead.
Well, we have to point out we haven't hit on every single woke talking point yet. So let me get to the last of them.
It gets better.
There's more. There's more.
Partnerships among regional.
Sounds like an infomercial, but there's more. Go ahead.
That's exactly what it is. And there's more. We have partnerships among regional, state, local, and tribal governments with disadvantaged communities, the private sector, and philanthropic organizations. Got to get that charity grift in there. They will also be critical. All levels of government need to align their efforts. Wow, that's a scary, scary sentence right there. All levels of governments need to align their efforts and work with private industry and community stakeholders to support sustained and targeted actions. A call to action, this blueprint, which is an important step towards a decarbonized transportation future, will be followed by a more detailed decarbonization action plans. There's more to come, guys. The agencies will develop and implement the action plans and will work with other federal agencies. We need more government involved in this. Governments at the regional, state, local, and of course, tribal levels. philanthropic organizations, the private sector, and with global partners, because the rest of the world has our best interests at heart, to achieve the following milestones. The rebuttal, of course, says, and we can't overlook the DEI or so-called social justice, because all of this is to make certain that we aren't all dumping the climate change, global warming on certain communities. But not to worry, we non-elites will all be poor and starving and have no dreams of traveling to exotic locations or even to the next county to see a cousin. It's a brilliant piece. So I'm
Where
glad
can
I got
people find it?
in the link, because I'm gonna in the chat, because I'm about to post the link.
Okay, thank you. Anything new in chat, Doug?
The pictures, some of the pictures are great. There's one where it's a storm and a stop sign hits the weathercaster. It reminds me of that Weather Channel crisis actor busted during Hurricane Florence, leaning into the wind, trying to report, and in the background, people walk by like it's normal.
Oh, wait a minute, they wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, you can totally trust these people. They're so honest.
You mean like when the person is reporting the mostly peaceful protest and the building behind him is on fire?
Oh, my favorite is it was the one about in Ukraine, and everybody's standing there, and then suddenly they run because they were told to.
Guys, next time I ask to read one of these type of stories or bills from our lovely government, can you just cut me off? Because I think I've done irreparable damage to my soul. Just reading that stuff. I feel unclean.
Well, read the rebuttals again and you'll feel better.
Well, actually, no, all he needs to do is he just needs to go to Reverend Al Gore, get a few, one of these things, or Hail Marys or something from Reverend Al Gore
Those are
to
Hail
cleanse
Gaius.
your, dirty, unenvironmentalistic soul.
Those are called Hail Gaius.
Hail Gaius. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah.
Maybe you just need to go out and buy an EV and you'll feel better. Just saying.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had an EV conversation erupt in one of my classes I teach in, with the high schoolers, and turns out two of the parents own Teslas.
Yeah.
Yeah, that got interesting later.
Doug, anything to share? Or
Anything
we'll
to
go
share.
to something I want to talk about.
Well, no. We don't want to do that because
No.
you might.
Yeah, it might be interesting.
No, it's so Illinois decided to remove Trump from the ballot. But now what was interesting is the judge, number one, was from what I understand, a traffic judge, but that's beside the point. Said there is nothing that has been shown that shows that Trump is disqualified as per 14th Amendment, Section 3. Therefore, we're going to remove him. Wait a second. You just said there's nothing there to disqualify. I thought that was interesting. Now, that said, that may not matter because on Monday, the Colorado ballot case reaches, well, it's been in the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court is expected to rule on that on Monday.
Yeah, perhaps, Doug. They have announced today that there's going to be a 10 a.m. Eastern announcement. They're not going to be, the justices are not coming to court, but they're going to be released something on some case, and it's suspected this will be
This
Trump.
is the one.
That it's suspected, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah, and when it comes to a ballot, let's get a little constitutional here for a moment.
Wait a minute. Hold on. What day?
Tomorrow.
Monday.
In the morning.
Yeah, so the 4th.
10 a.m. Eastern.
Great.
So here's the question. Can these states remove Trump from the ballot? Do they have the authority? Can they do it? Technically, 10th Amendment, a state can remove a candidate from the ballot. It's up to them to determine electors and all sorts of stuff. But here's the thing. If they're going to do it, they need to have a valid reason. That's just the way the America works. If you're going to do something, there needs to be a valid reason. So is the 14th Amendment, Section 3, which basically says that if you've given aid and comfort or participated in insurrection or rebellion, you can't hold office, and you can't run for office. You're done. Your political career is over unless you can convince 3/4 of the Congress to agree that to bring you back on board. That's having that opportunity. Is Trump guilty of that? And a part of that discussion then would be, does he have immunity as he's been claiming? So first of all, what is the definition of insurrection? Insurrection or rebellion is typically an attempt at a violent overthrow of the government. So first of all, when you observe what happened on January 6th, this violent overthrow, it is fascinating to me that a bunch of MAGA Republicans who are very evil and believe in the Second Amendment showed up with no guns. Just saying. That's interesting, first of all. So is it really an insurrection? Was it really a rebellion? Or was it just a protest? And there was a bunch of actors that were not members of the group before they got there who made it look like, because, it was a big production is what it was. It was a big Hollywood production that made it look like it was a violent insurrection because they broke a handful of windows. So first of all. Second of all, then we have to ask ourselves, all right, so did Trump incite the insurrection with his words? Well, wait a second. On January 6, 2021, on that day, who was at that moment president of the United States? It was still Trump, right? It was because the changing of the guard, so to speak, doesn't happen until January 20th, right? So President Trump is still president on January 6, 2021, correct? Okay.
Correct.
So if he's still president, what's his job as president? The primary job of the president, being the head of the executive branch, or executive being key here, is to execute the laws of the country. Now, if it's your job to execute the laws of the country and you're president of the United States, what is your job? What are you supposed to be doing here? Making sure the laws are carried out properly. And if there's violations, if there's any irregularities or things like that, it needs to be, you need to be aware of it and do things to fix it because it's your job to make sure everything's. Does that include voting laws?
Yes.
Election laws?
Yes.
So if his job is executive, execute the laws of the union, make sure election laws are being carried out properly, it wasn't insurrection. It was the president carrying out the duties of being president. First of all. Second of all, and we've talked about this before, but I think it bears repeating for those of you who not heard me speak before on this stuff, for the 500 viewers that are going on right now, because there might be 3 or 4 that have never watched us before. He said, well, I had immunity. So Whoopi Goldberg decides to open up her trap. And when she did that, and she says, oh, well, if he has immunity, then that means that President Biden right now, he can just arrest all the Republicans. He has immunity, do whatever you want as president without any recourse. That's not what is being said here. The question is, does the president have immunity for his actions? And now he's no longer president. Can he be charged for what he did while he's president? And this is an interesting topic. So first of all, we have this thing in place in the American system called impeachment. So if the president is violating the law, violating the terms of his office, acting in a manner that is abusive of his office, then Congress, beginning with the House, to bring the articles of impeachment, can impeach him, charge him, and then the Senate is going to hear that case and then decide whether or not to convict the president of that charge. So it doesn't mean that a president has immunity, just do whatever they want. There's impeachment. If the president is doing something stupid, like if Biden just decided to start, arresting Republicans, as Whoopi Goldberg suggested, the impeachment process would come into play. Then And I'm going to read you the part from the Constitution in a minute. If he is convicted of a crime while he is president, then once he is removed from office for that action, if it's criminal, he can be charged and taken to court criminally. But if he was not impeached for it, and he was not convicted of that impeachment, there is an immunity. How do I know this? This is a funny document called the Constitution of the United States. You might have heard of it. Article 1, Section 3. Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than the removal from office. Impeachment is a political trial. They can remove you from office. You don't walk out of the White House in handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit because of impeachment. Judgment in case of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. But the party convicted, notice you got to be convicted here, but the party convicted of impeachment shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. So if they are impeached and convicted of that impeachment, there is no immunity. They leave office because they were thrown out of office because of the impeachment, and now the criminal indictment is in play. But if they were not impeached and convicted of that impeachment for that crime while president, they have immunity. I hope that clears it all up for everybody. I rest my case.
No, you
Well,
don't.
I've got something to add on to that. Another article I was going to bring tonight, but since Doug segued into that, I will share another article.
So in other words, my big mouth lit a fire under the poor hamster, and now he's running like crazy on his wheel. Go ahead.
Can I put something in before you go to the new article, Brady?
Please.
Thank you. Let's explain something here. What article did you just read from?
Article 1, Section 3.
Article 1 is the first article, correct?
Mm-hmm.
It's the one that creates the Congress, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
It's the one that defines what the Congress can and cannot do.
Right. That's the reason why the impeachment by Congress is in it.
That's one of the points I want to make. This is not in Article 2, the executive. This is in Article 1, telling Congress what you can and cannot do. And if you do every step in here, and the final is person's out of office.
Yeah.
Done.
Well, it's reminding us that Congress is a check against the president.
Yeah. And they have the power to do what was just described, which is to charge or indict, try.
Mm-hmm.
And if you convict, you're just out of the game.
Right.
I just wanted to get that really clear.
And when I say impeachment, remember, when we say impeach, that's the charge. That is not removal from office. Impeachment does not mean removal from office. We've had 3 presidents, 4 impeachments. Andrew Johnson was impeached, but not removed from office by 1 vote. Clinton was impeached, but not removed from office. And now the blue dress lives in infamy. Trump was impeached twice, but not convicted, remained in office. Well, actually, the second one was going on after he left office, but that's a whole different story. As for those people think that Nixon was impeached, no, he resigned before he get impeached. But the word impeachment does not mean removed from office. It means to charge.
It also doesn't mean guilty.
It does not mean guilty. You've been impeached. You have to have been convicted. That's why in Article 1, Section 3, what does it say? Once convicted. See, so being impeached is not enough. Being charged is not enough. There's this funny thing in America called due process, and a part of that due process is for you to then reap the attainment or punishment for what you did. There has to be a conviction. I know it's crazy. A charge is not enough.
The other thing I think is important to note is that this whole thing is in the Constitution. They were thinking about this.
So Cold Steel 1. Yes, Trump was impeached twice, but he was acquitted. He wasn't removed from office. He wasn't convicted, but he was impeached. Impeached is to charge. They did charge him.
But I think it's just important that they put it in here, and they put it in pretty early in Article 1, which means they were thinking ahead.
So are you suggesting that a Democrat majority Congress could have gotten their version of an indictment, considering the 2018 campaign, most of them ran on the entire idea that we will impeach Trump if
Right.
we can just make up a crime. That impeachment actually carries no legal weight because there was, it's like grand jury, you can indict a ham sandwich, but you still got to go to trial and convict. And they
Right.
couldn't do that.
There was no conviction, so it's as if it never happened.
Well, speaking of convictions, there's also part of that called sentencing. We got some very good news on Friday.
Oh,
Yeah, an appeals court overturns a January 6th defendant's sentence,
I saw that. Yeah.
potentially impacting dozens of cases. And in a nutshell, the appeals court ruled that a J6 defendant's sentence was improperly enhanced, and it could impact a lot of other cases. On Friday, DC Circuit ruled Larry Brock for J6 crimes improperly had additional charges of interference with the administration of justice. This goes back to that 1512C issue that is also being heard in front of the Supreme Court outside of Trump. What it basically means, it's an Obama appointee, which makes it interesting.
Yeah.
Basically stating that impeding a legal proceeding is different. His argument, the judge's argument, I think it holds a lot of water, is that the act of certifying an election is not necessarily a legal proceeding in the pursuit of justice. That justice has nothing, and that is what 1512C was all about.
And I've argued they weren't even certifying the election. According to the Constitution, the election is certified when the electors seal and send their votes. That's the certification. This was just a counting of the votes.
Yeah, this will likely get to the Supreme Court as well, but in the meantime, there are an awful lot of January 6th defendants who might just see their sentences seriously reduced.
And that's interesting because, for example, I've got 4 friends who are waiting their sentencing. They've been convicted on all charges. They're waiting for the sentencing on April 20th. And it's a long time between the end of the trial and the sentencing, which I thought was interesting. Is it because the courts wanted to make sure all of this other smoke had settled first before they decided to sentence?
Do those people have any possibility of going after the system for violating speedy trial?
Oh, well, my friend has already told me they're going to appeal.
Well, not just that, but are they going to get any kind of compensation after the fact?
Yeah, I think they should.
Yeah,
I mean, lives have been ruined. It's like with my friend and his 3 friends who were there. And what they did is they showed up at 2:45 after the hubbub. They met a few people, shook a few hands, and went into prayer.
They were on the other side of they were
on the west side of the building, so it was the grass side. They didn't even get to the concrete, didn't get to the steps, didn't go inside, didn't confront any Capitol Police. The evidence against them is there was a photograph taken that they were there.
They were there.
They were there. That's it. That's all they know. But they've convicted them of all these different charges. And now we're just waiting for the sentencing. And my friend lost his business over this. One of his friends lost his home over it because he was renting, and the landlord says, well, if you're going to have I can't afford to have the FBI swarming around my property like they did, you're out of here. Another one lost his job. Another one lost his marriage over it. So, they're running lives for their diabolical purposes.
Yeah, it's political intimidation is what it is. They want to make it crystal clear that if we ever gather en masse, that the same thing's going to happen. I don't think it's going to work, because I've been to quite a few rallies and protests since that day.
Oh, I'm ready to start marches. I'm just waiting for me to get a few of my ducks in a row, and I mean I want to start doing marches like the civil rights groups did. I want to start marching on these capitals. I want to start marching on these offices. I want to start marching on the New York Times and LA Times offices and places like that. I want to start marches where we gather people and we have hundreds of thousands of people showing up during the march, and it's getting all kinds of media play. That's what I think we need to start doing.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. We're going to have a very interesting year. There is going to be civil disobedience on one side or the other, depending on the outcome of the November election. The Transition Integrity Project told us what the Democrats were planning on doing in 2020, had Donald Trump won. They said it would be a street fight, and they did not mean political. They now have brought in 7 million fighting age men from across the southern border. I think it's pretty crystal clear what happens when Donald Trump wins in November. Buckle your seatbelts, people, because they are not going to take a loss kindly.
The Summer of Love was a dress rehearsal, and the Reign of Terror is a minor blueprint.
Before
Yep.
we get to, thank you, gentlemen, for all the information. Before we get to the last part, might as well do it now. Promote yourself, Doug.
My name is Douglas V. Gibbs, known as Mr. Constitution, douglasvgibbs.com, politicalpistachio.com. My blog, I'm going to start doing videos again. I did one, matter of fact, today with the War Hamster. Go to Rumble and then look for War_Hamster, and I'm sure that video is going to be up soon, or if it not already. And I am also on 2 radio programs. That's right, AM Radio lives. I am the king of weekend political radio. You can't find a decent political show on the weekends. I've got 2 of them. 1 to 3 Pacific, KMET 1490 AM.com. Let me do that Allen speed. KMET 1490. That's 1490 AM.com. Saturdays from 1 to 3 in the afternoon live, or you can go to douglasvgibbs.com, hover over the radio link, a drop menu will come down, and then hit Constitution Radio for past episodes, or you can also find them on SoundCloud. My other show, Saturday nights at 9 p.m. Pacific, that's midnight for you, those of you on the East Coast, if you want to listen live, on KPRZ, KPRZ.com. That's K as in Kilo, P as in Papa, R as in Romeo, Z as in Zulu, KPRZ.com live, or you can go to just about any of the podcast channels. Look for Mr. Constitution Hour by Douglas V. Gibbs. I am on Odyssey, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Prime. I mean, you name it, I'm probably on it. So if you miss it on Saturday night, Monday or Tuesday, I think it's Tuesday when they post the show on the podcast channels. Heck, you can go to your favorite podcast channel, listen to shows I did a year and a half ago. And I've got some good ones. I got one where it was Jefferson versus Hamilton. If you've got someone needs to be red-pilled, have them listen to that episode. DouglasVGibbs.com, though, gives you all the info you really need. And while you're there, help out the cause. Help the movement. Let's push the movement forward. Become a patron for DouglasVGibbs.com. You just hit the join link. There's a little star next to it. It's all caps, join. $9 a month. Right now, it helps fund the effort. Down the road, we're going to have some exclusive goodies for those who are patrons. Down the road, once we get it all together and the lasagna's put together and it's hot and bubbling, we're going to have exclusive stuff for all of you. But until then, right now, you're just helping fund us growing. So DouglasVGibbs.com, that's DouglasVGibbs.com, DouglasVGibbs.com. Was that good enough for you, or did I not say KMET 1490 AM correctly?
You didn't say that correctly.
I had a feeling that might be the case.
Yeah, you didn't say that correctly. You
Yeah,
tried.
Well, you want to correct me? Go ahead.
KMET 1490 AM. Say AM because it stands for America.
Yeah, by the way,
Hey.
I've got this guy named Alan Myers. You may know him as one of my co-hosts on that KMET show.
And what does FM stand for? Come on. Free market. Come on.
Oh, free market. Okay.
Brady. See, I knew that would need 4 or 5 minutes.
So, Alan, you really got to let me go first when we tell people where to find him, because there's no way I can live up to that little diatribe. I'm going to feel so small.
We'll call it a short story, but go ahead.
Yeah, you got to let me go first from now on. I can get my little stuff done, and then I can just walk away from the room for 5 minutes and come back. It'll be perfect.
Okay.
No, but you should go follow Doug. He does a lot of great work. I follow Douglas V. Gibbs. I support his work. Real quick before I tell you where to find me, a couple of our local friends from San Diego. One is in the chat. And hey, Kevin, what's going on, buddy? Appreciate the support. And our good buddy Bill tells me he's working tonight, but he's listening in his earpods. So it's been too long, buddy. Let's get together soon. But thanks for tuning in. You can find me, most of my good stuff is on my Rumble channel, which is war_hamster. Did a great video with Doug today, called, what do we call that?
Federalism Rising.
Federalism Rising. That'll be up on the channel tomorrow. Did a sit rep this morning with a good friend, Gordon, Ghost of Base Patrick Henry from the Badlands Media. You may know him. We talked about what's going on. Bill just texted me, goes, thanks for the shout out. Love you.
Very good.
I
Hey,
had to-
Bill.
I had
Hey,
to test it.
Kevin.
Anyway, there's some interesting stuff happened. Some German Air Force generals got their audio at a phone call intercepted by Russians. It was released in the last couple of days, and what they're talking about is basically putting Russia where they can put German troops on the ground, just as the Brits and French already have. And we are inching closer and closer to a kinetic World War III. I hope some common sense people get involved in this soon, because we're being run by lunatics. But that's the kind of material content I put up on my channel, as well as constitutional stuff. That's my Rumble channel. You can find me on Twitter at war_hamster1776. Make sure you spell it right, because there are other war hamsters out there on Twitter. They're not terrible hamsters, but they're not me. And of course, you can get me on Truth Social, war_hamster. And you can see me pretty regularly on a show called Patriot Soapbox on DLive, most Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Actually, Patriot Soapbox is the channel. The show is for the
For the
Republic.
Republic. My apologies. I usually, and by the way, you can get our replays on my Rumble channel of the For the Republic. If you miss it live, I get most of the shows uploaded to my channel.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I don't have much to say. I'm here, obviously, Sundays, 5 to 7 p.m. West Coast time. Appreciate, Doug and Brady for being here. You can find me on the web, FedEd, FEDED.us, for basic monetary system education. Check it out. And of course, Saturdays, 1 to 3 p.m. West Coast time, I go to, what is it? Terrestrial radio. Yeah, live.
Terrestrial radio. Yeah, AM radio. And that stuff they're trying to take out of the new cars, especially the EVs, that stuff, yeah.
Well, you don't need it. I mean, why would you want to be bothered with that?
That's the reason why you can go to KMET1490am.com or KPRZ.com. See, that's a wonderful thing. Terrestrial radio is the beautiful merger hybrid of both.
There we go.
Hey,
By the way, real quick, poll. There's a poll that just came out. Majority of voters think prices will go up if Biden wins re-election. Just saying.
Thank you. What do you have,
I'm
Brady?
in a mood to give our buddy Bill an even bigger shout out.
Okay.
Because he's a good enough friend. He has a phenomenal channel on YouTube that is growing leaps and bounds, called the Community Prepper. I don't think he really need to describe what that's all about, but Bill has some fantastic content. He's one of my closest friends in the whole patriotic movement, and you ought to go check him out. There you go, Bill. Give you a promo, buddy.
Is there a website? Is
You
there
need
a
to return
website?
the favor. No, just YouTube, Community Prepper.
Okay, cool. Well, with a handful of minutes left, we didn't get to this topic, but I'd like to address it in the near future. And Doug and I have talked about this before. It pivots around, Organic Act of 1871. Ring a bell, Doug?
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, someone earlier in the chat room just said, well, gosh, the United States, became a corporation back in, and now there's a new constitution. I didn't address it, but it's still floating around out there, this idea.
What I'd like to do with all of you is, because I've read it, we've talked about it, but I think it bears a new discussion.
Well, and before you say that, Warhamster, wasn't there a book also by someone who tackles this?
Yeah. Coach Mel is a content creator, researcher, really classy woman, and good researcher. I have asked her to come on to do a show or shows with us that talks about the whole 1871 incorporation and related theories. The panel is going to definitely be Coach Mel and Doug. I think Alan might be invited if you are ready, if you feel strong enough on your research on this particular topic. But we are definitely going to address it all. in a very polite manner, because a lot of the people that have chosen to believe that this particular theory are people you would absolutely want in your foxhole. They
Yeah,
agree.
they're allies.
They're allies, that we have the same enemies as them. We just have drawn different conclusions on
Right.
certain historical facts. And my concern is that they're putting their efforts in directions that are not fruitful when they could be doing more beneficial things locally. And that's why we want to do this video and really talk about the subject, not debunk it. Let's discuss it and say, what is the actual fact, what happened, what didn't.
What Doug and I have done is we have gone through the Organic Act,
Line by line.
1870, paragraph by paragraph. I read it, we discussed it, read it, discussed. We went through the entire document. There's nothing that leads to the conclusion that some people have. The other thing is, if actually a new corporation was created, some of my questions on this topic are, well, who did the incorporation? Who had the authority to do this? Because there's nothing in the, Doug, is there anything in the Constitution that allows somebody to just incorporate the America?
No, there's no authority. And not only that, but the word corporation didn't even mean what we're being told it meant in that act. In fact, Hamilton uses that term all the way back to Constitutional Convention. But what he meant was to turn the states into basically provinces that were dependent on the federal government.
Right.
When he used it in that context. When it's used in the 1871 Act, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I'll just say this, is that Washington, D.C. was being incorporated. In other words, it was be made into a municipal corporation, meaning it would have its, it's a council and things like that, be able to take care of its own stuff, but at the same time, it's also it's dependent upon a larger body.
And
that's essentially what they meant.
And who did the Municipal Corporation of DC report to? Congress. Congress.
Yeah.
Doesn't, and for
me,
me,
real quick, does Congress have the authority to change the Constitution on its own or rewrite it?
No, it requires an amendment.
You can't pass a
in
law.
order to incorporate, in order to turn Washington, D.C. into the type of corporation that is being suggested, that would require an amendment. Now, that said, we know these jerks act illegally all the time, so the response would be, well, they're not going to follow the law, and this is true. But they also, if they would have pulled that one off, they would have been bragging about it. Why would they keep it in secrecy?
The thing is, even if it was, where would you incorporate the United States?
Well, who's the board?
Well, who are the stockholders, and who did they pay, and how much did they pay, and under what authority was this corporation created?
Right.
Well, apparently the stockholders would be the City of London and the Vatican Bank. Unfortunately, the Vatican Bank wasn't actually formed until 1942. But
yeah,
that's a bit of an issue.
Here nor there. Here nor there.
So basically what happened was, because there's a question in there about this in the chat room, the square, the 10-mile square, the district didn't change. That was created by the Constitution. That's the seat of government. What happened is there's this area around it that was ceded to the government for the city of Washington, D.C. That city was incorporated by the 1871 Act. That property was ceded by the states through that act so that it would become a federal city, a municipal incorporation, an incorporated city. So not the square part, but the area around it.
And the point being that there's
a large population that was that, the mostly emancipated slaves.
But no state would have the federal capital.
Well, that's true. And they didn't want any state to have a federal capital. But these people who had gone to Washington, D.C., the seat of government's not supposed to have a population, but the area around it wound up with a population. And these were mostly escaped slaves during the war and emancipated slaves afterwards. So Washington, D.C. has always had a black population. And so for various reasons, they felt that it needed to be incorporated as a federal city. We can get into that another time because we've got like 30 seconds left here. But
well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for being here. Chris is somewhere. Beautiful view out of her living room. I love it. I'll finish up with this. Alan Myers here. This has been another episode of For the Republic. To all you good people out there, lovers and defenders of liberty, freedom, rights, individuality, equality of opportunity for all. To all you patriots, yeah, you know who you are. Until next time, may you be and stay safe and well. Patriot out. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
As always, it was a pleasure. And I think you and I and Brady make such a fantastic team.
Can you imagine what we would sound like if we were in a tavern, just having a couple of beers?
In 1775?
1774, yeah.
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 Yeah, we'd be hanging out with guys like Hancock and Samuel Adams. We'd call ourselves Sons of Liberty, probably.
No doubt. Not mothers. Okay.
Well, I'm called a mother all the time, but there's usually
But
another
that's
word
a
that follows
completely,
it,
that's
yeah.
a different reference.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Well, usually I'm told I'm number one with the wrong finger when they're calling me that too. But anyway.
Well, thank you. Brady, thanks for being on, adjusting your schedule. I really appreciate it. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I like Brady's new armor. That's pretty awesome.
It
Yeah,
is.
but you can't drive real well when wearing it.
Now, this is one of the very first avatars one of my people made for me. I haven't worn this one in a while, but
like
there's the whole thing. Can you see it?
Cool. I like it.
It's got a little caption at the bottom that says, "We've got questions," but you can't see it.
That'd be a
Well,
good team.
what about the teeth?
You ever been bit by one of them? They're ferocious.
Yes,
I
we
look-
are.
I got bit in my finger. I still have a scar and it bit through a nerve. Yeah, that's something I didn't mess with again.
You mind your P's and Q's, Missy.
Yeah, I remember my son getting bit on the tip of the finger by one time. And I mean, blood's just flying in all directions. It was such a deep bite.